Moshe Rabbeinu says, it says before the Exodus, Moshe Rabbeinu had told the people about how there's going to be a mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. Told them you're going to have a Korban Pesach here in Egypt, and you're going to eat this Paschal lamb with unleavened bread and with maror, and you're going to do it every single year. And when your son asks you, what's this all about, you're going to say, and it says that they reacted, it's brought into the Farshim. They were very happy to hear this because they're told, they're going to have children. There's going to be a better tomorrow. One day, they're going to sit in I guess not in their houses, they're going to all sit in Jerusalem. They're going to have Korban Pesach. They're going to remember how horrible it was being in the Egyptian servitude and how God redeemed them. And now, that which they do, you think, if you're supposed to be celebrating freedom, so I understand having roasted lamb is quite good, but the poor bread of affliction is bread of poverty or bread of affliction, and moror, representing the bitterness of the servitude. You're bidden to eat that, celebrate it. It's the victory sandwich. Yes, it makes it all the more sweeter. So they were very happy to hear such a thing. So I hope that we're reading about this now, reading about the Thanksgiving korbanos, and everything else makes us think about a happier time in the future, because the future could be now, it could be tomorrow if we choose it to make it such. We're looking forward to it. I'll get my own copy over here also. And if I'm not mistaken, we're in the 14th parak, talking about the Nazirite vow. They're saying, interesting, a person takes a vow to bring sacrifice in a place that's not the Beis HaMikdash, some rival temple. So he's taken a vow, so he has to fulfill that vow, because that's what the vow means. Even if eventually he'll be hit with a count of violating a severe Torah prohibition. It's like a person who takes upon himself a sacred vow to eat a ham sandwich. He shouldn't be eating a ham sandwich, but he'll have to do it. He'll get hit for eating the sandwich. He'll get lashes for such a thing, but he has to fulfill his vow. That's basically what analogous to the halacha over here. This one's a major machlokes. We saw, who's it going to be? It's going to be Rashi, Rambam. How to understand this Gemara? There's a rush there. Let's see it inside. It basically has to do with the Mishneh in Menachos. It says here, Chatat Lasham Einan Ba'in Ela Al Chet. The person can technically volunteer to bring a burnt offering or a Thanksgiving offering. That's his choice, or just a peace offering. But the offerings that are prescribed for certain types of sin, which is called a Chatat or a Sham, the guilt offering, Einan Ba'im Ela Al Chet. If a person actually did the prescribed sin, so he sins in a certain way, usually the shogeg, whatever it is. We saw an asham is just for specific sins, even if they're not the shogeg. So he has to bring this sacrifice. But he cannot volunteer it or promise to bring it. We said, what's the difference? Neder and dava. Sometimes he says this animal, and something says, stam, I have to bring it. It's upon myself. Difference between gavra and chepsa. Now, there's a few types of chataot and ashamot. There is something called an asham talui. An asham talui we saw is a person doesn't know if the sin was committed. Okay? This particular type of sin, but he doesn't know yet. Did I actually commit the sin? I was shogeg, but was it committed? You're still looking to see what the facts of the matter were. Okay, so he knows he was eating something, but they haven't established, did he get the chalev, or did he get the regular type of meat? Chalev, the forbidden fat. Sometimes certain parts of chalev are indistinguishable from the edible parts. You just have to know that it came from this side of the line of the medium, or the other side. Was it closer to the diaphragm or not? That's basically why shechita is so important, and knowing how to check the animal. So it says here, if he says, I take it upon myself to bring this sin offering or this guilt offering, where he said about an animal, this is a chatat, this is supposed to be an asham, lo amar klum. Now, I bring up the asham toli. Well, why is this a question? Because they bring it up in the notes. So I'll read you what the notes say, but then I'll just give you the background that we have from Masechet Menachos. No, sorry, it's a chulin. Get the two confused. Okay, it's a chulin. Not Zavachim, not Menachos, it's chulin. It's on the 41st page. It's on Mem Aleph, Amud Beis. He says here, Nechaku Arishanim Masham Talui Ba Beneder Uvin Dava Olov. So it says, no chatas, no asham. What about an asham talui? The Rambam says, asham talui eno ba beneder undava. So this, when it says no asham, it also means the asham talui. And the Rosh says that, yes, it could. Yachol avo beneder dvava. And How do we know this? Where does the Rambam say this includes Asham Talui? Because he later says in Hilchot Shkita that such a thing. What does he say? Ima shochet l'shem Asham Talui shkito k'sheira, olo das Rambam shkitoto k'sheira. The Rambam says that if a person has intention to bring to slaughter something for the sake of a sacrifice that actually couldn't be, so he would be, and he's doing it outside the Beis Hamikdash. So he is not ruining the korban. He's not ruining the animal. It's still kosher. So how did the Rambam know to lump asham talui with an asham over here? And the answer is in the Mishneh in Chulin, like I just mentioned. It says that, well, actually, it doesn't say. There's a list. Asham talui lo nizkar ben korbanot she'enon ba'im b'neder undava. There's a list there of korbanot that cannot be volunteered, and the asham talui is not on that list. Okay, it's not on that list. So is it included in the list or not, or is it left off for a particular reason? So the Gemara asks a question there, and the asks is the asham talui is ba b'neder undava, and the answer is that according to Rabbi Eliezer, it is brought b'neder undava. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it can be brought in neder undava, but according to Chazal, the rest of this chacham, it couldn't be brought in a neder or in a dava. That's the implication there in the Mishneh, at least the way the Rambam understands that Gemara. So he would lump them together, and they're very important. I like to see. We'll just put this on the list when the Beis Hamikdash is built. How will the Sanhedrin decide? We'll see also, but soon I guess we're approaching a Ravad that also really illustrates this. Ha'omer korban mitzarazeh oyolet zo alai. Let's say a person's magnanimous. He sees that this fellow's a mitzorah. Eventually, the mitzorah, when he needs to purify himself, has to bring a certain korban, or the woman who gave birth. The woman who gave birth has to bring basically a pair of birds. But he says, you know what? I'll do this guy a favor. I'll bring his korban for him, or I'll sponsor it, and also, or maybe for that woman, I'll bring that pair of birds for her. I'll sponsor the pair of birds. If that particular leper or that woman who gave birth are poor, meviano der korbanani. So the person who sponsored them brings the korban that's fit for a person who's poor, because some of these korbanot actually depends on the wealth of the one who's obligated to bring the korban. Okay, if they're wealthier, they bring a bigger korban or a fancier animal, and if they're poor, they bring less. And if these subjects, the mitzorah or this woman who gave birth, happen to be wealthy, noder korban ashir. So the person who took this upon himself, he has to bring the sacrifice fit for a wealthy person. Even if he himself is relatively poor. Interesting halacha there. Or I guess you could summarize this as we follow the one obligated to bring the korban and not the one who volunteered to sponsor it for. Another halacha over here. A person declares that he's taking upon himself to sponsor this person's sin offering or his guilt offering or his burnt offering, his peace offering, whatever it is. If that person who's actually obligated to bring this korban is willing, so he can accept it. He lets this magnanimous individual, the sponsor, go ahead and do it, and it counts. It is accepted. Mitkaper means that he himself has achieved whatever atonement he needed to through the offering of these korbanot. And here's where we get to the nakuda of the machlokes. This point is going to be disputed. Ratzah bishat hafrashatho. So this fellow who's benefiting from this other guy's promise he was willing at the time the animal was being set aside. V'lo ratzah bishat krava ela chazarbo. But by the time it came to actually bring the korban, suddenly he's not so willing to let this other fellow do it for him. He's reneging. Still, if we're talking about a burnt offering or a peace offering, the Kohanim go ahead and offer it, and it still counts for him. He had accepted it once, so no backsies. Even though now he doesn't want to, right before it's offered, he's taking it back. He's reconsidering. The point is that he had conceded, or he was willing at the time the sacrifice had been designated. If the sacrifice in question was a sin offering or guilt offering, lo nith kaperlo. So now it doesn't count for him. Why? Ad shirtzeh mitchila ve'ad sof. Until he's actually was willing through the whole process. Mitchila sof means from beginning to the end. Now, Rabbeinu Gershom, you have to add a line over here. We're going to put an asterisk. Ratzah bishada grava ela chazarbo. Rambam is basically saying here that the case was, we know that this fellow who's benefiting from the bringing of this korban had been willing at when the animal had set aside, but eventually he recanted. So then we have a case. So it depends on what kind of sacrifice it is. That would be the din. Rabbeinu Gershom says, if it's a suffix, if he still wants. Okay, this is the Rabbeinu Gershom says that this din only applies if we don't know what the guy's actually thinking. Right? We don't know what he's thinking, and then we invoke this. But if what happens if we do? Okay, what's the implication? So they actually put in the notes here. Kasher lo yodim. Okay? Lo yodim means we don't know. Ima mechurav korban shinat ato lo efshar lakriv avuro al smachas haskama. So that's this case over here. We don't know, he says. Val imu omer shechazarbo in lakriv avuro. Rabbeinu Gershom says that if the fellow actually says explicitly, no, I no longer want to go ahead with this. So even the Ol and Shlamim, those are rejected over here. Okay, so that's a difference of opinion how they understood the source material over here. So the question is, do we go and ask him? Okay, that's another question. It's reminds me of the case of the Gentile who's converted as a child. So his parents converted to Judaism, and he was a youngster. He was already born, but he's been raised Jewish. Technically speaking, his his status is in flux. He has a chance when he becomes older to reject his conversion, and he could just leave the fold, and that's totally fine. So the question is, how is he given that? Do we ask him such a question? It seems from the Rambam says that he has to be aware of it himself, and he has to give up. But if he misses his small window, he even goes like one day after bar mitzvah, acting all Jewish and everything, so he's missed his chance. I know of an unfortunate case of a fellow who claimed that he wanted to opt out at his bar mitzvah, but he was sort of pressured not to. And already, just within 2 years, he was already off the derech, which I think was a good thing because he really wanted to become one of those weird Eastern religions, either Buddhist or Hindu, or both. To me, there's no real nafkamina, even though there are actually many nafkaminas between them. The point is, it's not Jewish, and there's a lot of idols going around. So that's a problem. Let's see here. Homer Re'alai Kinidrei Rishaim. This is something that comes up in Nedarim and Nazir quite a few times. Person says, I take it upon myself to bring all the vows that Rishaim do. Why? People who are Rishaim have foul mouths, and they swear a lot, and they take a lot of oaths. So aside from the nivel pet aspect, it seems that they, whatever, it's stereotypically true. I'm reminded of the story of the fellow who, to save himself in Holocaust times out there in Ukraine, he was hiding as a regular Ukrainian. He wasn't Jewish. He worked as a farmhand. And one of the women remarked that he's different from all the other, lowly workers because he doesn't seem to be using so much nivel peh. He's not swearing enough. And he realized, oh man, he could almost blow his cover. They'll figure out he's a Jew. So he better start, using the sailor talk. So that's what the Chazal are referring to over here. Shemin nidrehen nazir the korban ushvua. When they open their mouths, they're basically saying they're taking upon nazirus and a korban, and they're making they're swearing to something, to the effect of something. So he's basically took it upon himself. He has to know that he opens his mouth, he's obligating himself. If he said kinidrei kisherin, like proper people do, lo nechayev klum, because kosher people don't go swearing all sorts of things. They watch their mouths. They don't get themselves in trouble. Harei kinidvot kisherin. If he says, I take upon myself to do not the nidrei, means the promises they make, but the devote, the things that they tend to donate to the temple. So that's kosher people actually do that. Kosher people dedicate animals to the temple, which is a good thing. Harezen nadar ben nazir over korban. So he's taken upon himself to be a nazir, because a nazir involves bringing all sorts of different korbanot at the end, and some sort of korban. V'chol kinuye korban korban. And don't forget any expression that people normally use to describe bringing a korban in vernaculars and also Hebrew slang, whatever it may be. The Mishneh has quite a few examples. So that's basically taking upon himself to bring a korban. And let's see, we'll do a few more halachas and we'll call it a week. I wish everybody good Shabbos. Let's see this one. Ena noder v'lo mitnadev chayav ad sheyeh piv v'libo shavin. I thought this is interesting that the Rambam is he jumping between no, this is a singular, so noder or the mitnadev doesn't mean and. It means a person who makes a promise or volunteers something, they're only obligated once their mouths and their hearts are equal. That means he actually meant what he said. What would be a case? He meant it to be a peace offering and actually said peace offering, and not, for example, he meant it to be a sin offering, but he said a peace offering. But then again, we're not supposed to be a sin offering. I meant a burnt offering. A burnt offering. He's thinking about bringing a burnt offering to the temple, but he said peace offering, so he's not obligated. Ketzad. The person was thinking he was going to take upon himself to bring a burnt offering to God, and he said peace offering. And he wanted to say this animal, not take upon myself, but this animal will be a burnt offering to God. And instead he said peace offering, lo amar klum. So he's not obligated himself. By the way, he has to be honest. They ask him, he just declares, this is to be a peace offering. They say, were you serious? You bring a peace offering? And he says, well, I meant burnt offering, so good, he's off the hook. But if you investigate, he's sort of trying to get out of it. Maybe he's being dishonest. He says, I remember seeing the Rambam that it says that if I had said peace offering, but I really meant Ola, a burnt offering, so I'm off the hook. So I'll say that now. Doesn't work. His intention was a promise to bring an Ola. The Amar Korban, and he just says sacrifice. Lindor b'cherem, v'amar hekdesh. What's lindor cherem? Cherem means, I think it means giving it to the Kohanim. Hold on one second. I'm on the right page. Yeah. He's giving it basically to the Kohanim or the temple fund. That's what a cherem is. So Sedea cherem is a person donated his field to the temple, and he better get it back before Shemitah. Basically, he donates it to the temple. It becomes the Kohanim's. When Yovel hits. Okay, that's a Sedea cherem. So he says here that if he meant cherem, it says hekdesh. It just stopped dedicated to the temple. Okay, Dvar of Kayamim. So that's that holds. She'olah korban. The burnt offering is a korban. Va'cherem hekdesh. And also the cherem is also technically hekdesh. They give it to God. Animals become hekdesh, or he gives the money. It's all going to end up as a korban. So he has to watch out. Sometimes there are other words also that are sort of synonymous. That's what people usually mean. They say this, they're going to give it to God. The korban is the olah is a type of korban, and cherem is a type of hekdesh. So he has to watch out what he's saying. Okay? There's a subcategory, but it still counts. One other halacha. I have a note here, by the way. It says that we're going to talk about Baal Ta'acher, means making sure to keep one's vows on time. So that's going to be down here. I'm trying to think. I think maybe we'll introduce it this week. We'll go into it mostly next week. It says Bindarim undavoth enot tzarich lotzi b'sfatav. Technically speaking, he doesn't even have to say it with his mouth. He said pi v'libo shavin. Well, what's his mouth if it's not his lips? Elim gomar b'libo v'lotzi b'sfatav klum chayav. He has to be honest with himself. If he really made such a decision, let's say he was unable to talk, he was in Shmon Esrei, let's say, I don't know, woke up one morning, he was convinced, he was thinking about it all night, that's all he could dream about, and now he's pretty determined. He wakes up in the morning, he's going to do this, so he's obligated. He's decided that this animal is to be a burnt offering. Or somehow he's going to bring a burnt offering. One's a neder, one's a dava, or he's a chayav lavi. So he has to bring it. I'm wondering why they put an olive here. Is that just a mistake, or is it that's Machon Mamre's way of telling us that there's a chametz under the hay? Because I've never seen spelling like this. This is similar to the way it's spelled in Arabic. When you do have such a thing in Arabic, a possessive hay at the end, usually her possessive. So there is the equivalent of an olive there. Very interesting. Never seen this before. Certainly not in I don't think the Rambam would have written it. That's not the way it's written in the Torah ever. So he says, whoever is generous of heart should bring it. Bin divat halev means basically the promise was taken in his heart. Yet chayev lavi, so he has to bring it. And that works with regards to every other type of kachim and nidvotam. A person's really resolved to bring such a thing to God, so he has to do it. Echad Nador Midavot, Im Sha'ar Dvarim Shadam Chayav Behem are Merachim V'Damim Umasroth Umatanot Aniyim. When we're talking about all these promises, volunteer something, whatever it is, and everything else that a person is supposed to bring from Arachim. Arachim means he says he's going to give the so-called valuation of a particular person. Every person, you look at his age and you look at his gender, and then you look on the chart, and there's a particular silver value that he has to then give to the temple. Damim, and damim in this case means also money. Usually that's what damim means. Money he's going to give to the temple. Okay, and masroth, these are tithes, matanot aniyim, or just gifts he has to give to the poor. There's a few things he has to give to the poor, leket shechla peya, etc. Mitzvat asay min haTorah shevia kol beregel shepagabo tehila. The mitzvah is positive commandments of the Torah that he has to make sure to deliver it by the first festival that he encounters. That is, there's 3 festivals for this din. It's Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, Tabernacles, Pentecost, whichever one comes first. That's what he has to bring up. It says Uvata Shama Wavethem Shama. The end of the pasuk says that you should go seek out God's place and go there. Uvata Shama, and then the pasuk says Wavethem Shama, and bring there Olotechem, Zivrechem, everything that you promised to give to God. Klomar, when you go to celebrate in front of God the next holiday, Tavi kol mashata chayavbo. You have to bring everything that you're which you're obligated. V'titain kol chol v'shelecha l'Hashem. And any obligation you take on yourself to God, you have to bring to Him. By the way, what's the Rambam saying here? Matnos aniyim. So this seems to include tzedakah. So that's going to be the thing we're going to discuss next week. So here we see it's a positive commandment, okay, to bring it right away, at least by the first festival. And he says here, but if the regel came and he didn't bring it, so he's missed the mitzvah say, but of ru'alav shalosh regalim, 3 festivals pass. But he didn't bring the sacrifice that he said he was going to. He didn't give over the money. Arachim, this type of money, the charamim, or also sometimes money or different possessions like the field, or whatever other money he promised to the temple, then handed over to the treasurer. Avar below tase. So now he's violated a negative commandment. A lot of times in Torah you have the positive side and the false and the negative side. Lo te'acher l'shalamo. Don't be late in paying it off. That means paying off your debt to God. Over below tase, and he doesn't get hit with this prohibition. That is, he is not considered liable. Ad she'evru raglei hashana kula. Until all 3 holidays have passed. Elsewhere, the Rambam says, wait a minute, this gives room to say that, well, if I made the vow before Sukkot, so it would be Sukkot, Shavuot, Pesach, and Shavuot. So I basically have 8 months to do this. And then elsewhere it says, we're going to discuss this, we'll pick this up with next week, maybe it has to be in that order. It has to be Dafka, a Passover, a Pentecost, and a Tabernacles in that order before he's hit with the liability. But delaying this delivery of the korban or the promise, whatever it may be, what's called the Baal Te'acher in yeshivish language, is not met with lashes. Why? Because technically speaking, he didn't do anything. It's an act. It's a crime of omission, not of commission. We'll stop that here for this evening. We'll ask everybody, pray for speedy victory. Pray that Am Yisrael end up stronger through all this. Pray for the rebuilding of the temple, the restoration of all Jewish lands, and the elimination of Amalek speedily in our days. And we look forward to keeping the rest of these commandments also. In the schus of keeping the commandments that we are forced to keep right now, we should be able to have the opportunity to keep even more commandments. Have a Shabbat Shalom. Be good.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.